You are a scribe in the city of Ugarit on the coast of what is now Syria, and your king is dictating an urgent letter to the king of Cyprus. Enemy ships have been sighted. Cities up and down the coast are already burning. Your king needs ships and soldiers now, or there will be nothing left to save. You press the wet clay, you finish the message, and it is never sent. The tablet is still sitting where you left it, unfired, because Ugarit burned before anyone could carry it out the door. Archaeologists found it 3,000 years later, baked hard not by an oven, but by the fire that destroyed the city around it. That letter is real. It was written sometime around 1200 BCE, at the edge of what historians call the Late Bronze Age. A genuinely interconnected world, more than most people picture when they think ancient. A cache of diplomatic correspondence known as the Amarna letters found in Egypt shows pharaohs and other Bronze Age kings addressing each other as brother, negotiating royal marriages, and trading gold, horses, and ivory back and forth like established trading partners, not distant strangers. Tin, from as far away as Afghanistan, moved through this network to make the bronze that gave the age its name, worked into weapons and tools and workshops on the Greek mainland thousands of kilometers from where the raw metal was mined. It was, in its own Bronze Age way, a functioning international system, with genuine supply chains and genuine diplomacy holding it together. Within about 50 years, almost the entire system was gone. The Hittite capital Hattissa was abandoned, its royal archives left behind rather than carried off by conquerors. Mycenaean palace centers, Pylos, Mycenae, Tiryns, the seats of the world, Homer would later mythologize, were burned and never rebuilt at that scale again. At Pylos, clay tablets baked hard in the very fire that destroyed the palace at record a kingdom in the middle of organizing coastal watchmen and rowers, bracing for an attack it clearly saw coming and couldn't stop. Ugarit, the city with the unsent letter, was destroyed so completely it was never reoccupied. Its ruins simply sat under sand until the 20th century. Further inland, the city of Amar preserved its own burnt archive of ordinary legal contracts frozen mid-transaction in the day it fell. Cyprus's trade network collapsed. Only Egypt survived as a functioning state, but even Egypt came out of this era smaller, poorer, and permanently diminished from what it had been. This wasn't one war. It wasn't one army. It was nearly an entire interconnected civilization across multiple countries and cultures, failing within a single human lifetime. And at more than one site, the last thing anyone wrote down was a plan for a defense that never got the chance to happen. For a long time, the explanation Egypt itself offered was treated as the whole story. At Ramesses III's mortuary temple at Medinet Habu, inscriptions and carved reliefs dated to around 1177 BC. The date historians now use as shorthand for the entire collapse. Describe a coalition of seaborne raiders, groups modern historians call the Sea Peoples, attacking Egypt by land and sea, their families and ox carts reportedly moving with them like a migration as much as an invasion force. Ramesses III claims to have defeated them in battles at the Nile Delta and the region of Jaki in the southern Levant, and the temple walls show Egyptian arches and warships closing in on enemy vessels in dramatic, carefully commissioned detail. For decades, the Sea Peoples did this was the tidy, dramatic answer taught as settled history. Raiders came from the sea, burned everything in their path, and an entire interconnected age ended in fire, all at the hands of one identifiable enemy. But here's the problem with a single invading army as the whole explanation. Some of the societies that collapsed were never attacked by anyone the Egyptian records describe. The Hittite capital deep inland in central Anatolia shows no sign of a seaborne raid at all. It was abandoned, not besieged. If one group of raiders can explain every collapse across every coastline and every inland capital at almost exactly the same time, what actually took the whole system down at once? The modern answer, developed most thoroughly by the historian Eric Klein, isn't one cause. It's several arriving together, stacked on top of each other over a few very bad decades. Paleoclimate evidence, pollen records, sediment cores, and stalagmite growth layers from caves that quietly recorded regional rainfall for millennia, points to a severe multi-year drought across the eastern Mediterranean in exactly this window, the kind that fails harvest for years running, not one bad season. Some archaeologists, including the geophysicist Amos Noor, have proposed an earthquake storm. Not one dramatic quake, but a cluster of major earthquakes spread across several decades, striking different cities in different years, each one arriving before the last damage had been repaired. And underneath both of those, the system's own interconnection, the very thing that had made it rich, may have made it fragile. When bronze production depends on tin routes running unbroken across thousands of kilometers, you don't need every city destroyed to break the whole economy. You just need enough of the network interrupted that nobody downstream can get the metal to make a sword, a plow, or anything else the whole society had quietly come to depend on bronze for. Even the sea peoples themselves fit differently into this picture than the old story allowed. Egypt's own inscriptions name several distinct groups traveling and fighting together. The Peliset, Sheridan, Shekelish, Danian, and Weshesh among them. And many historians now think at least some of these were not purely conquering armies, but displaced populations, people whose own homelands had already failed under drought or earthquake or collapsing trade, now moving by land and sea, looking for somewhere that still worked. The raiders in Egypt's inscriptions may have been as much a symptom of the collapse as a cause of it. Refugees from the same disaster, arriving at Egypt's border still standing. And here's what's easy to miss in Egypt's own boastful inscriptions. They describe a victory. Ramesses III did, by his own account, win. Egypt was the one civilization in this entire collapse that didn't fall, and Egypt still never fully recovered the wealth or reach it had before. Winning the battle didn't mean surviving the century intact. There's a particular kind of loss in a system that fails all at once, instead of one piece at a time. A single war has a villain, a battle you can point to, a treaty that ends it, a victor who writes the history afterward. What happened across the eastern Mediterranean around 1177 BC doesn't offer any of that cleanly. It offers a scribe's letter that never left the room, a capital abandoned rather than conquered, coastal watchmen at Pylos organizing a defense the record never tells us the outcome of, a victorious pharaoh presiding over a smaller, poorer Egypt for the rest of his reign, and historians 3,000 years later still arguing over how much of the blame belongs to drought, how much to earthquakes, and how much to raiders, who may themselves have been yodeled from the same disaster as everyone they attacked. Maybe that's a real shape of the story worth sitting with. The late Bronze Age didn't die from one wound anyone could name at the time. It was a network, richly connected, efficient, and entirely dependent on every part continuing to function. Tin moving from the east, grain moving from the west, kings writing to kings as brothers to keep the whole arrangement running smoothly. When enough parts failed in the same narrow window, there is no slack left anywhere in the system to absorb it, no backup route for the tin, no reserve of grain built for a drought that lasted years instead of one season. The letter never made it out of Ugarit, not because no one tried to send it, but because, by the time it was written, there was nowhere left in the whole interconnected world for a rescue to credibly come from. The strength of the network and the completeness of its failure turned out to be the same fact, viewed from two different directions.